Welcome to Minerva Meets. I'm your host, Sonal Chandler, and this is episode 7. Today, we're going to be talking about the human side of AI and how AI can impact human interactions. I've invited a resident expert to the show today to help me unpack this topic. I'd like to introduce Dr. Joni Connell, President of Flexible Work Solutions, to the show. Dr. Connell is an organizational consultant and leadership coach with over 20 years of experience and the author of Consulting to Technical Leaders, Teams, and Organizations, Building Leadership in STEM Environments. As a former engineer, Joni specializes in helping technical leaders develop people strategies to better manage their teams and build strong relationships across functions and organizations. She also helps people understand how technology, especially AI, impacts people's relationships and well-being at work. Joni earned a PhD in psychology from the University of California, Berkeley, and a BA in engineering from Harvard University. Welcome to the show, Dr. Connell. I really appreciate having you here.
Well, thanks. It's very much a pleasure, Sonal. You can call me Joni.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't
Yeah.
sure, and so Joni it is. We will go with that.
Yes. I feel like that. I want to be in my professor mode. I'll try to be casual. Yeah.
Awesome. In most of my episodes, I've managed to weave in some aspect of AI. And, I thought when I was doing research on this episode and about the work that you do, some terms came to light that I actually hadn't heard before. Things like AI mediated communications and human to AI interactions. And I realized that these are common things out there, but I wasn't sure if it was something that was known, more commonly across this audience. So I thought we could start with perhaps doing a little bit of terminology level set, and you could explain both of those topics.
Sure. Absolutely. Well, AIMC, artificial intelligence mediated communication, I think comes out of the CMC movement, which is computer mediated communication. And that's been around, that term has been around for a very long time. In fact, back when I was at Berkeley, I did my dissertation on CMC, interactions and how computer mediated communications influence the way people perceive each other.
Mm.
I mean, you can imagine that. So we'll just step back for a second and talk about when you have a computer that's in the middle of a human to human interaction, like what's pretty obvious, like email or even just like
Hmm.
video, right?
Yeah.
It does influence how we interact with each other, and especially over text. We've seen this over the decades when we've had people flaming on social media, things like that, even on
Yeah.
emails. I mean, I coach people all in teams all the time about how to not send that email that you when you're in that mood, right?
I've been there. I've been there.
Right. Like, and don't do it because the other person will see it. And even if you send something that's a little terse, people get offended and things like that.
Yeah.
So there is this effect of when you have this computer in the middle there, and it's been around for a while, but then we add AI into the mix and it gets even more complicated.
Yeah.
I think this is what you asked me about. The AI is in there modifying how we communicate. And like you send that email, AI might help you compose that email. As we all are familiar, I think now you go to hit type on your keyboard and all of a sudden the word pops up that you weren't going to use and you have to choose, do I want to use this word or a different
Yeah.
word? It
Yeah.
might even send you down a path of saying a message that you didn't even want to send, like, let's
Yeah.
meet tomorrow. And I'm like, no, I don't want to meet tomorrow.
Yeah.
you know,
Absolutely.
let's meet your boss.
Yeah. In
Yeah. So,
fact,
yeah.
I feel that even just that the automated text that comes up sometimes has uh, made me a little lazy when it comes to spelling
hmm hmm
because I just let it do it for me,
Right.
right? And then I'm just like, wait a minute, do I know how to spell that word or not? So
Yeah.
it's almost doing all the thinking for me.
Well, that you raised that, Sonal, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. These little things, seemingly harmless, seemingly helpful,
Mhm.
actually do have longer term impacts on humans. And the answer is I don't know. Like none of us know exactly how much impact because it hasn't been around that long. But
Right.
we're starting to see some of the impact, and there are some positives. It helps us, and perhaps we can write more positive messages because that has been shown what does happen typically with AI.
Mhm.
But We can also have more negative, and we've seen on social media, you talked about the
Mm.
children, but adults too, we've seen that social media amplifies negativity.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it gets more clicks, right? And so,
Yeah.
that's in addition to changing or substituting words or offering words, it also determines what we see and when in certain situations. That those algorithms are looking, at our feeds and telling us what to see, not necessarily in our interest, but in the interest of usually profits.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if we just coming back to, so we talked a little bit about the AIMC,
Hmm.
AI mediated communications, and then the human to AI interaction is,
Hmm.
can you tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah. Well, you think about that too. That used to be HCI, human computer interaction, right? And then
Okay,
we have
yeah.
AI, in there as well. And basically, it's a human, a person interacting with a computer, not necessarily to email somebody else, but just interfacing with a computer for an app or something. And
Mhm.
I think that the most obvious one right now would be chatbots, right?
Yeah.
If we're looking at AI. So instead, you have customer service now, instead of talking to a person, you get on the app and you
Yep.
you communicate with an AI, and that's a very different way of being. And
Yeah.
we've been frustrated, I think, at the beginning when the chatbots weren't as effective, and we're like, no, it's not answering the question. And we've started to see the limitations
Hmm.
where they can answer questions effectively. And now some people, in fact, the majority of people prefer just, okay, I have a simple question. I'm going to ask the AI because I don't need to wait on hold
Yeah.
for 15 minutes for a human. But I have a more complicated question, like my flight got canceled and I don't want to go here anymore. I want to go there instead, or something like that. You might need to actually wait and talk to a human being.
Yeah.
But the effects of this too, what are some of the effects of when we're interacting with chatbots?
Yeah. I mean, I actually just had to do this a couple of weeks ago, and I was pleasantly surprised at the improvement in the chatbot because I could remember using the chatbot feature and thinking, oh my goodness, just get me to a human.
Yes.
Whereas in this case, I was actually using it. It answered my question and I didn't have to get out of my seat. I didn't have to pick up the phone and call anyone. And it was so convenient.
Hmm.
But I'm curious to understand, what are some cons to this? And I think I could, they're pretty obvious, but I'd love to kind of dig into some of those.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'll tell you, in the workplace is where I generally focus, and that is
Hmm.
we have more AI. I guess you would say like the generative AI. We can just ask it questions instead of talking to a friend or a colleague or an
Yeah.
expert. You just type it in. So we're communicating with people less frequently, right?
Hmm.
We're asking the AI, and we're probably getting a little more generic answers as well, which often comes up not necessarily as creative or unique. It's more averaged across a lot of data. So we're communicating with AI more. I mean, we can even get into AI coaches and asking about interpersonal issues or getting
Oh,
reinforcement for feeling angry at your boss. People go in
right.
and do that too. So we're talking to an AI, not a person, and our skills atrophy,
Yeah.
right? Just
Yeah.
our skills to be with people atrophy. And perhaps we start saying, you know what? I don't really even like people so much anymore because, my chatbot always says something nice to me, like, great job, Joni,
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
doing this, or yes, I can understand how frustrated you must be with your boss. What a frustrating person that is.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and so you kind of like it, as
Yeah.
opposed to your friend or colleague might say, hey, just suck it up, or actually, I think you're wrong in this case. Let me tell you why, and
Yeah.
or they might not have the right answer. They might not even have empathy. Like, I don't even, you're talking about different kind of people in the workplace. We don't all have perfect reactions
Right.
or desired reactions.
Hmm.
As humans, we have to learn how to deal with that. And if we are avoiding that, that will cause problems over the long term.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I can imagine how different team dynamics are when you've got AI in the middle, right? Because before these brainstorming sessions and some people could have this that whole what is it, storming, norming, all that
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
process, right,
Mm-hmm.
is almost eliminated because you're only looking at one tool to get all the answers, but you're not necessarily getting a collective consensus on various ideas. And
Mm-hmm.
so that just sort of dwindles, and perhaps the idea is not as great as it could have been if multiple folks were putting in their thoughts.
Sonal, that actually raises a very interesting point, and that is that conflict generally is necessary for creative solutions,
Yes,
right?
yes,
And not necessarily interpersonal conflict. We want to avoid like calling people out like for being a
yeah,
bad person, but the conflict over the ideas. And
yeah.
if we're missing out on that, the ideas aren't generally as creative and innovative. And that could be a problem for innovation and organizations in addition
Mhm.
to just the interpersonal.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I want to play devil's advocate for just a
Hmm.
second because if you think about the newer generation kind of coming into the workforce, and their world has been so technology centric. And so when is it just those of us who have grown up without technology and now have to deal with it that these problems are impacting, or do we think that the newer generation and the way they interact with each other is being impacted by this as well?
Well, when you grow up with this, you don't know what you don't know,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Which can be positive and it can be negative.
Hmm.
I mean, those of us who didn't have all this are used to, when you're a kid, you didn't have something to entertain you on a long drive. You had to come up with a car game or
Yeah.
something, or look out the window, or just sing a song or something like that. But when you have tablets or, iPads or something like that, you don't really have to think and you can do all this. And as children who are just given these devices, they don't understand that there might be another way. And, no, don't really, it doesn't really enter their mind. And, there are positives and negatives. And so I guess your question was around, is this going to be an issue, I think, for the next generation? Are they going to be less creative? Well, we
Yeah.
are seeing some signs. I mean, people are people, right? That
Yeah.
have been
Yeah.
around a lot longer than technology. So
Yeah.
I'm not going to discount that, right? That we will, I think, overcome challenges. But there are also, signs, and there are some studies out there that are showing that people are, less creative in the workplace, and we're looking at as people come in, frustrations with management and things like that, and innovation.
Hmm.
So, I mean, we can go down that path if you want to, but there are differences that do come up. Yes.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I've also heard a little bit about how this instant gratification, or this need for instant
Hmm.
gratification,
Hmm.
has been exaggerated, with the advancements of technology. So in one case, it's great that I just have to pick up a phone and can get Uber Eats at my house. But
Hmm.
on the other side, it actually has, I think my last guest had mentioned that the one skill that kids are losing these days has to do with like cooking. People aren't learning to cook because they could just pick up the phone and call. And there was some stats around this. So it's just interesting to sort of, these the way AI, or even just technology, and I don't want to just blame AI, right?
Hmm.
I think technology in general, we tend to always talk about the positives of it, but I think it's important to take a step back and look at, what are some of the negative impacts on our
Hmm.
society.
Yeah. Well, I'd say loneliness is a big one, and we saw that from the
Yeah.
pandemic. I think
Oh
that,
yeah.
we can draw a lot of conclusions from that opportunity, or maybe not
Yeah.
as such, but if we look at it in a positive way, at least, and how people were being impacted by technology, but also AI was largely involved. I mean, even just think about video communications and Zoom, for example. I'm not going to say one particular product. There are a lot of products that have video communications, but how we doctor up our appearances so
Yeah.
that we can filter. We can do this on
Yeah.
social media, on pictures and all that too. And we don't end up being as authentic with others,
Yeah.
and we don't have the genuine connections with others. And we become more careful too. There's a lot of surveillance at work. And
Yeah.
so people have sort of taken their interactions offline because they're afraid of the boss or the big
Mm-hmm.
brother,
Yeah.
watching everything that they do. So we have a loneliness effect and social isolation as well. That's in
Yeah.
part from the AI. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, a lot more to unpack there, but I wanted to
Mhm.
go to sort of switch gears here and talk about ethics and
Mhm.
AI. And I know this is a popular topic. It's a really hot topic that comes up when we talk about AI. So, could you kind of get us started on this? Like, what do we need to know about ethics when it comes to AI?
Wow, that's a big topic. So
Yeah.
I mean, I tend to go with ethics as being overall, are we doing good? Or are we doing harm?
Hmm.
And if you look at a lot of ethical codes across industries and across cultures, you will see that they have some, I guess, similar components. And one of them is called beneficence versus non-maleficence, right? Which is big
Okay.
words for saying
Yeah.
do good, benefit people versus avoiding doing harm, right? So that's really where I stand. That's overall. But then we also have things like informed consent. Are people having the choice to engage in something as, a tool being used to manipulate their thoughts?
Mhm.
Without them knowing about it. Is information confidential? Who owns the data? How is their
Mhm.
information being used and shared? And then do we have some kind of scientific basis for the products that we're creating and the processes we're using? Or is this just something that someone designed off the cuff without any backing or for their
Mhm.
own personal use? I mean, so those are like general ethical principles that the different ethical codes would employ. And I tend to use, well, I mean, I don't tend to, I do abide by the American Psychological Association Code of Ethics because my background is in psychology and as a
Mhm.
consultant, that's what I use. But there are all sorts of other ones, IEEE, AMC, these are like engineering organizations. There's the Association for the Advancement of Artificial Intelligence, professional ethics codes and stuff. And so, I mean, I'm going down a path here, but I mean,
Yeah.
whose code do we use, right?
Right.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's a big issue, but they all tend to have a lot of similarities, like the bigger principles.
Yeah. And so it's almost, if you're in this state of confusion on whose code to use,
Hmm.
I think it's sort of going to the baseline of, doing good,
Hmm.
and making sure
Hmm.
that you're not doing harm. But oftentimes I wonder if you don't know if you're doing harm.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a really important point because you don't know if you're doing harm, and part of it is anticipating potential harm that could ensue from what you are doing. And of
Mm.
course, we can't anticipate everything. Sometimes we just get hit by a complete surprise, like
Yeah.
COVID, I think came out of nowhere. I mean, some
Yeah.
people might have been predicting that because they're in the industry of looking at disease and et cetera, but probably for the rest of us, we really weren't thinking about these kinds of things. And but maybe we should. Maybe we should be
Yeah.
bringing people into our development teams or at least our organizations and having those conversations of anticipating, especially with AI, what could people misuse it for or use it for, or
Mhm.
what kind of changes might happen that would bring people to do bad things with it,
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I know that there have been some recent breaches where I think there was some very good fakes that were made,
Right.
and I think CEOs of companies were transferring very large amounts of money
Mhm.
because everybody on this video looked like they were someone that worked in the company,
Yeah.
right? I mean, so, what is being done today to ensure that there are, proper ethics being leveraged? I don't even know if that's the right way to say it.
Yeah, well, yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, the governments in various places are
Mhm.
taking charge. I mean, the EU just, in fact, I think it was yesterday or just within the past couple of weeks,
Mhm.
actually passed their laws about AI with, big fines if people aren't being transparent, I think is one of the major issues there and are using it in ways to harm people.
Mm.
The US, we have the executive order that came out last year, I think it was, or earlier this year from Biden, but we don't have a lot of laws yet. It's hard to keep up, in
Yeah.
terms of legal and governments and all that. So ethics really comes down to what are we doing voluntarily, right? How
Yeah.
are we becoming ethical people who are making decisions that aren't necessarily based on punishment from the law. And how are people doing this? Well, companies are starting to really take this seriously
Yeah.
at the executive level. And sometimes they will bring ethicists in. They could be people who have really studied ethics. It could be people like me, consultants,
Hmm. Hmm.
psychologists, and creating ethical boards to advise.
Sure.
We have people who are also having some compliance on ethicists too. I
Yep.
think advice is better, and people need to figure things out on their own and have independence from the company. I mean, if they're employed by the company to tell the company how to behave ethically, there's a
Hmm.
lot of room there for being forced to say certain things
Yeah.
that go with a company. So having some independence. There are ethicists who get involved directly on development teams, right, at that level with the developers to ask the questions and those kinds of. And then there are also teams who are starting to bring this in and be trained on their ethics and processes to incorporate that into their designs.
Oh,
The
wow.
things,
Okay.
yeah, like
Eh,
ask, yeah, go on.
yeah. No, well, you were gonna you had mentioned A/B testing, and
Oh,
I wanted to just touch on that because I wasn't sure,
mhm.
how that relates with ethics.
Okay. A/B testing is a way that developers test whether new parts of code or new parts of apps or different features are better or worse for
Oh,
them.
sure.
And
Okay.
okay,
Okay.
so typically an A/B test is you have two different versions of a software or an app that come
Hmm.
out at the same time, and they are controlled because everything is the same except for one thing. Now, it could be something as simple as the color of the icon on your phone or something like
Hmm.
that. What color is
Hmm.
better? When do people click on it more? And so they'll release two different versions of that. And so if you look at your friend's phone, it might not have the same thing as you have, right? Or it might be
Yeah.
in areas that, people can't do that, far across the different parts
Right.
geographically.
Right.
But so it could be, different pieces of your word processor, figuring out, which is easier for people to use. And then they get the data, which they're collecting on people, on the users that they're,
Hmm.
and then they determine which is better. And when I say better, best, whatever, good, those are
Yeah.
all judgment terms, right? And
Yeah.
usually those are what's better for the profits again, right? For the company.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So
Okay.
this is what caused, in a lot of times, there's lots of different technologies here, but we find that the metrics that are being used
Yeah.
by the companies can determine the types of directions that the companies take in their products and how they use them. Now, that's kind of complicated. Let me just give an example.
Sure.
So a metric in social media,
Hmm.
okay, they found that time spent on the app is
Yeah.
one, right?
Yeah.
Companies like, it could be games, it could be anything too, but let's just say social media. People, they want you to spend more time on it because then, and they also want engagement, right? That became
Yeah.
another metric, right? So we have time
Yeah.
spent and then we have and then we have the engagement. And so what we end up finding is that they put something out there and it turns out that people start spending a lot more time, if they add this feature or that.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden, the metric becomes the value of the company, right? The
Yeah.
value is time spent. And as opposed to the value might be how healthy are humans using this app, right? And then we have the addiction factor. People spend so much time on it, they don't get their work done, they lose their job, or they don't get
Hmm.
their homework done if they're children, or
Yeah.
they start having health issues, or they start losing their friendships because they're on social media all the time instead of actually getting together.
Right.
And, this happens in the workplace too, various things. So,
Oh, yeah.
A/B testing can cause a lot of this, but there's the metrics that we're using in these tests, as well as actually doing these tests on people without the informed consent, right? People
Yeah.
don't know. I mean, they might, when you get a new app or whatever, there's an update, it gives you a button to click, and you can go to like the 14-page user agreement and read through it all, but nobody does that.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
you just click,
Nobody.
yeah, okay, let me take me to the app, and you keep going. So you don't really have the consent. So that's another aspect.
I love this example that you provided about the metric time spent because I didn't necessarily think through the value of the company and then, how healthy is that person or is it causing other challenges? And I wonder if CEOs look at it that way. I mean, in the end, right? Because if revenue is the, importance, are they looking at these other things that impact humans?
Well, Sonal, that is a good question. I mean, are they looking at it? Is a CEO a benevolent person? Do they want to do
Yeah.
what's right and what's good for people? That would be part of it.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, even if that isn't, necessarily a factor, are they avoiding risk for their business? Because,
Yeah.
right, this is the sort of the stick, not the carrot, right? The stick
Yeah.
is if they are risking causing harm to people, people might notice that and then not want to use the product anymore, or they might flame them on social media, and all of a sudden,
Yeah.
people move to something else and they'll have a big business risk there. So I think that there are both sides of that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think you make a great point on if people think that they're being harmed, because I think right now, we're in a place as a society where we don't think these things are really causing harm, right? And so I
Right.
think that there almost needs to be a similar PSA campaign,
Hmm.
like there was back in the 80s over smoking or drinking and
Hmm.
driving, right?
Hmm.
There needs to be a mothers against, or not necessarily against, but please don't use social media as much, or whatever it
Right.
is, right? Organization out there. Because I don't
Yeah.
think that campaign has started yet, right? Because everybody, I've had so many conversations recently about this addiction to social media or whatever it is. And, when are we gonna kind of snap out of it and realize that there are these downstream impacts?
Hmm.
It's no different than smoking a cigarette in my mind.
Yeah. Well, I want to say a couple things in response to that, Sonal. I mean,
Sure,
one
yeah.
is with things like social media, a lot of these, the AI is programmed to make people feel good.
Yeah.
Right. So they don't realize they're being harmed and they like it. So they don't want to change. Just like with the cigarettes. Ooh, it feels good to smoke a cigarette. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't think so, but some people do, right?
Yeah.
And so they keep doing it. And it's hard to stop. It feels bad to stop. And the algorithms make it feel bad to stop. They
Yeah.
create anxiety in people not to use it. So that's an ethical dilemma there. But the other thing is that these types of algorithms, we're talking about social media is just sort of being something that's out there in the world and sometimes used for work. I mean, a lot of us
Hmm.
turn to social media for workplace activities, but some of these algorithms are being brought into organizations to actually manage people. And,
Yeah.
gamification of the workplace is a lot of similarities there from social media and other kinds of apps. And so we need to think about how are companies employing this kind of technology to, I guess you would say, manage, control, manipulate workers, and is it for good or are we using it necessarily, for bad?
Yeah. Well, I also think that there's, I ultimately think that people are out there to do good. I do want to give people the benefit of the doubt. And obviously, we're not here to say that all technology is bad and don't use
Right.
it or anything like that. But I think it's more about the awareness of the impacts. I mean, similar to even eating like a bag of Doritos, right? Eating one Dorito isn't going to hurt you, or a bag of Doritos isn't going to hurt you. But if you had one, bag every single day, well, you're going to see some problems there.
Right. No,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think these are the kinds of things that leaders need to be thinking
Yeah.
about and, how they are employing the technology and having those conversations and having the awareness. I mean, it's a lot
Hmm.
to take in when you're making a business decision about which technology to do your workplace performance management.
Yeah.
But if those questions are being asked, then we can avoid the unintentional harm.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think you touched on this a little bit in this conversation, but let's talk about persuasive technology. How you mentioned about social media and the addiction there. What is persuasive technology?
Right. Well, persuasive technology is a technology, I guess software technology, you would say algorithms that capitalize on psychological principles
Hmm.
and theories to, I guess, influence the way people behave and think.
Yeah.
All right. Now, we've always had persuasive methods, right? We teach people you need to be more persuasive in your
Yeah.
messaging, right? I
Yeah.
mean, humans do this all the time. And then we have people who are particularly good at the persuasive, like salespeople or somebody who might have a lot of education and practice and using specific techniques that are known to cause a certain effect.
Hmm.
But when we get into persuasive technology, we have algorithms and AI with a large amount of data that can do it even better than humans. And they
Hmm.
can do it at a level that's, you would say, subconscious. And so, a part of persuasive technology, I think that we need to talk about is the personalized persuasion.
Hmm.
Okay, so that is when the algorithm knows so much about you as a person that they can, or it can use that to target a message to you so specifically, more than any human could, because we just don't have that kind of data. Like, I don't know enough about you, Sonal,
Yeah.
to give you
Yeah.
that level of personalized messaging, but also getting at subconscious processes like cognitive shortcuts, like things that we use that are like you might call biases and
Hmm.
shortcuts that we take just as human beings, because our brains can't always take in like all the information at once. So we just have these little shortcuts that we use to make decisions, and that can be targeted through AI in a way that we aren't even aware that it's happening.
That's kind of freaky, when you think
It
about it.
is.
It's. I almost feel like what you just described is like some sci-fi movie that I've watched with some advanced AI technology
Hmm.
taking over the world. But
Hmm.
we're there. I mean, minus the sci-fi part of it. But it's kind of scary.
Yeah, it is scary. I think it's really scary. I mean, again, we bring it to the surface and we look at, let's
Hmm.
just say you walk into a supermarket, right? And they place the candy bars at the cash register. Okay,
Yeah,
I'm gonna call it a cash register. Hardly anyone
sure.
uses cash anymore, but at the
I
register,
know, right?
checkout. So people are kind of nudged to buy something at the last minute because they might, just be
Yeah.
standing there idly, and saying, "Ooh, that looks tasty." I've already done So there are ways, and people can do research to figure out how to get people to buy things. And we have what they call nudges, right? And so
Hmm.
these are things that are out there, again, not necessarily all about AI and technology,
Right.
but
Right.
when we employ these nudges in technology and with AI that is so much more powerful than humans, we can nudge people along to do things that they may not have necessarily wanted to do. It may not be in their best interest. And we're
Hmm.
seeing this a lot in shopping, online shopping
Oh,
applications,
yeah.
things like that. I mean, you see, like anyone opens up, well, I'm not going to name names on this one too, but let's just say you open up an online store and you're not going to see the same things that the person next to you sees because they've personalized it to you. You
Yes.
open up your app and your ads are different too because they've decided that somebody, that's so personalized to you, this might actually get you to buy or click
Yeah.
on this. And when you're not necessarily at the conscious level of deciding, that looks like a good product, maybe I should do it, but subconsciously your brain is getting the positive rewards for clicking in that direction. That
Hmm.
seems, they call it also dark patterns is another word too, which is,
Oh,
sort of,
okay.
dark, right, versus
Yeah.
light in terms
Yeah.
of unethical versus ethical. And, who's monitoring this? How are we able to avoid I guess you might say, being victims of this kind of thing. And I think that we've talked a little bit about ethics and who can monitor, who can, governments and companies,
Hmm.
but also educating ourselves on
Yeah.
how to use technologies and limit our use and navigate through and design, right? I mean, the developers of
Yeah.
this technology, like how do we educate ourselves on all these things and the impact of them? I think it will make a big difference in terms of how ethical we are and how they
Yeah,
are.
completely agree. And I think there's an empathy aspect of it too,
Hmm.
right? Is that as you're going through these activities, how do you have empathy? And how do you, I mean, teach that to somebody, right?
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
so, but it's super interesting because just today I was on a call with a vendor evaluating their product, and I happened to go to their website prior to the call. And as soon as I went to the website, I immediately thought to myself, oh no, my social media feed is going to be full of this vendor's advertises. And sure enough, when I then went to my social media, that's the first thing. So it's like you can't escape it,
Hmm.
and subconsciously, I wasn't the one buying, but it was interesting how all that is just so connected, and there, it's always in your face. Someone's always watching or tracking your movements.
Or even listening in. I don't know how many
Yeah.
people have
Oh,
mentioned the fact like you're just talking to a friend and maybe the phone is listening in. The next thing you know, you pop open and you get something
yes.
related. We were just talking about, oh, we're going to take a trip to London. And all of a sudden
Yeah.
you start getting London taverns or
Yeah.
hotels. And you're like, wait,
Yep.
you know,
Absolutely guilty. That has happened to me so many times. Yes,
right.
absolutely.
Hmm.
Well, this is such a fascinating topic, and I love the work that you do, and the fact that somebody is actually vesting in helping people understand a little bit more about the other side of technology, because we hear so much about the benefits of technology, and I don't think that you're here to poo-poo technology at all, but more
Right.
just bring some awareness to the impact that it's having on us as a society, right?
Exactly. So yeah. How do we do it in a more intentional, ethical way and
Yeah.
be and aware and aware?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been wonderful. And before we log off here, I'd love to give our listeners some takeaways. And, I like to sort of put these into a couple of different themes. And I think the first one is to understand that AI has so many benefits, right? There's the efficiencies that it could bring to your day-to-day activities if you're a small business owner or if you have a large corporation, and the improvement of accessibility to knowledge too, right? But there's this other side of it where you have to be aware of the ethical challenges around AI and technology in general. So, my first takeaway is, like, don't go into it blindly, definitely educate yourself, which kind of leads me into the second takeaway about learn, be curious, but take time to educate yourself about AI. Ask questions, join groups, contact Joni,
Hmm.
talk about, have the conversations, take a course, but definitely educate yourself as you learn to navigate this space. And, kind of tying the whole title of this podcast episode into the third takeaway here is, don't forget the human side of things, right? Because in the end, we are all humans. Let's make sure that we don't forget to shake hands, hug each other,
Yeah.
have conversation with each other, not through I am, but get up and walk to each other's desks, go out and grab a coffee. Because, I think relying on technology so much can, like you said at the beginning, atrophy your skill sets, right? And so, is there anything that you want to add to that, Joni?
Yeah, I say put humans first in the
Yes,
design of the technology, right? Not as an
absolutely.
afterthought. And sometimes it's easy to just stay focused on the technology, but just remember, like you just said, Sona, we're all humans.
Yeah, we need a bumper sticker. Do people make bumper stickers? I mean, maybe a pin. Put humans first. I'm making them and sending them to you.
Excellent.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I'd love to give you an opportunity to tell our listeners where they can find you. If you have a LinkedIn or website or anything, please let us know.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm on LinkedIn and it's Joni Connell, but my website is Flexible Work Solutions, and that's at flexibleworksolutions.com. That's the easiest way to find me, and you can email me or set up a chat with me if you want to talk.
Awesome. And we will put that in the show notes as well. And I just wanted to also remind people that if you want to get in touch with Minerva Consulting, email us at letstalk@minervaconsultinginc.com, or you can visit our website at www.minervaconsultinginc.com. And before I sign off here, I want to ask our listeners to take 3 quick next steps. Number 1, please subscribe to the podcast so that you don't miss a new episode. 2, if you could leave a rating, I'd really appreciate that. And then finally, number 3, add a comment. I read all of them. I love the feedback. So please take those steps. Dr. Connell, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to having you back for some more insightful conversation.
Thank you, Sonal. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.